Hey everyone, welcome back to CryptoCache. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you're having an amazing day. Happy Friday to you. And at this point, we're just going to take a quick look, of course, at Bitcoin as per usual, kind of see what's going on. We're going to probably look at the larger time frames, just kind of help understand the big picture, of course, so we can identify a little bit more, kind of what's going to happen, not in the immediate future, but the next few weeks. Because I obviously at this point we know where the price is at, right? It's trending really close to 40,000. Looks like it's on a razor's edge, ready to drop the bottom. That could very well happen, but let's understand the big picture first and then work our way down, right? If you're new to this channel, not a financial advisor, I love teaching people how to trade, and I hope that you can learn a thing or two here today, of course. And obviously, if you're not currently a community member, consider joining CryptoCache.tech as the website. I teach you how to become a better trader and send out signals for every single trade that I take. And right now, I'm not really taking a stance, honestly. I want to and consider definitely a short position here, but I feel like we may see a bounce over the weekend and or early next week, back up to somewhere in the range of about 43,000 and or 41.5. Okay, I'll explain what I mean by that, but for now, I drew out the Fibonacci retracement levels for a larger time frame effectively, so we can kind of understand more bigger movements, right? Because the larger you draw out your Fibonacci retracement lines, the better perspective you get on macro. And obviously, if you're going to be short, dealing with smaller time frames, maybe having a short-term trade of some sort, then perhaps in some cases a shorter time frame would be ideal to use or to identify short-term movements. But we really ultimately want to look at big picture here today, and that's kind of, I feel, more important at this exact moment, just based on the significant decrease we saw yesterday, which was, how much was it from top to bottom? Drum roll, please. 9.5%. In one trading day. So anytime we've seen that in the past, it's taken a little while to recover, right? Now, granted, back here, of course, we saw something very similar, and it recovered quite nicely, okay? Now, granted, it took a few days to recover, of course, and it was slow and steady. We shouldn't expect an immediate bounce back. But if we were to see the price continue to progress back upwards, it should and very well could look like something like this, right? Whereas the price comes up to a major Fibonacci retracement level, which is why I use the larger time frames here, to help us identify, again, that bigger picture. So taking a look at that here, looking at the Fibonacci retracement lines, we look at 42,800. We can just say round number 43,000, I think would be a likely top here effectively to continue to create those lower highs and lower lows, right? Now, I'm not speculating or saying that that's going to happen exactly. We might, in fact, this might be the new bottom and it could continue up from here, but we didn't hit a higher high and higher low previously. I know it seems like it did, but if you kind of take a line and draw it across here from this upper candle wick to the most recent candlestick close, it's negligible, right? It was barely making a higher high. So in my personal opinion, that's not groundbreaking. That basically implies that we have a strong resistance right at about 46,000, as we've indicated previously, and obviously a tentative resistance right around 44,500. Okay, so that's no surprise there. So the fact that we didn't make higher highs and higher lows, for lack of better terms, in the big picture tells me that we're going to probably continue to channel here, either to the side for a little while, or, of course, again, bounce off, come up to 42, 43, possibly even 41, and then likely another dip to possibly fill the gap here, whereas we have a lack of volume in the price range between 38,000 and 40,000. Now we're developing more volume here at this point, right around 40,500, etc. But generally speaking, there's a pretty big gap here. So it is likely that the bottom, if it drops out, it will continue to progress closer to 38/39, possibly even lower. I think 35, though, is realistically probably the lowest point, which we'll see, just based on the overall sense of the fact that we're probably going to see the price continue to progress sideways for some time. Like, in other words, I don't think mooning is possible for Bitcoin, and I also don't think that we're going to see anything sub 20 to 30,000. I think that's very unlikely, just based on the overall sense of things. I think this year is going to be the trend between 30 and 50, 30 and 60 maybe, right? That'd probably be realistic, which is fine, honestly. It's not terrible. You don't have to expect Bitcoin to do great things just because the 4-year cycle has happened a few times over. We're in a different world now, right? We're in a different market and things are a lot, I guess, so just more dynamic, right? Because we can see these violent increases and decreases based on simple moves in the market, not even based on logical TA, right? So again, a lot of funny stuff. Anyways, enough about that. Let's just go ahead and touch on the simple indicators here, kind of work our way down, and we kind of see from there. So we're back under, I should say, the 50-day SMA. And this could reiterate or reaffirm the fact that we might actually see a resistance there at about 41.5. Now, previous support establishes itself as a current resistance if it was broken, which obviously it was. So I do think in the immediate future, perhaps this weekend or Yeah, next week, depending on the news, of course, we could very well see that be the highest point in which the price could travel. So I would think that if we could see the price come up to 41.5 and kind of get rejected, that would be a decent consideration for a potential short, based on the simple fact that the likelihood of continuing down lower from there is pretty high. That should be the high point here. Now, again, I drew out these lines here, of course, for the larger time frame to identify that 42,800. I would say just say round number 43,000 would also be a potential indication of a high, right? So the price could very well come down, do one of these, and or it could come down as it has and bounce off of 43. One of those two targets is likely. So I would say if you have kind of a loose stop limit just above 43,000, you'll probably be fairly safe if you're to consider a short position in the relative near future. Again, today still is yet to be seen. I prefer to wait for confirmation. I don't love taking entry as soon as the price wicks down this low. Again, logically speaking, you would think that what goes down must come up. The price has to bounce back, right? It doesn't have to. You'd be surprised. I mean, we see this little channel right here that we're in. 41,000 is the new resistance, as well as 39,400 is the new potential support. Okay, so we might see a channel between this range here for the weekend. We may not, right? It's really hard to say. I would say depending on how today's candle closes would really help us understand a lot. I know I say that often, but the reason why is because it gives you that full-on 24-hour confirmation of what happened in that trading day. Today, yeah, it looks like it wants to come back, but will it? Hard to say. Lately, we've seen some very volatile market closes lately, and that is something that I think we need to take into consideration and not try to, try to have too much hope here that Bitcoin is going to just recover and bounce right back. I think that's a terrible mindset, and I don't think it's realistic. Okay, again, we just got to try to take a neutral stance here and look at all the factors. So let's go ahead and identify that. Oh, one last thing before we move on from the 1 day. We are under 50 on the RSI, which is notoriously not a good sign, and that does imply that 50 on the RSI could very well be reflectant of 41/41,500. Right, so I do think that 41.5 could be the most immediate highest point that we'll see, and we could see rejection off that if the price comes back up to test that level. That's what I'm interested to see. If we can get a close below 41.5 today, that would be important in the sense of understanding that we're still stuck under that level, and that we could we'll see that working as a consistent resistance. We've also got a bearish divergence here as well that just hit. It just came to fruition. Now, the last time that happened, if we look here, was roughly right here when the price broke 46,000. Okay, the price has pretty much been under 46,000 ever since then. Now, not to say that we're going to see the price continue to digress completely, but just know that when you have a MACD divergence on the 1 day, that's pretty much telling you the overall momentum has lost. We're under a key level resistance at 50 on the RSI and 41.5 that was our previous potential support. So there's literally not a single thing here telling us that Bitcoin's going to bounce back and recover strong, if that makes sense, right? It could bounce back tentatively. That definitely happens. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a close closer to 41.5, but until that happens, we want to kind of calm down and relax. And let's look at some other things too with momentum, because I think that we want to understand exhaustion and understand, kind of generally speaking, where it might happen next. Now, keep in mind, the price is trending right at the 200-day SMA on the 4-hour. That's notoriously a strong support level. And you can see, even though it broke down below and closed once, it rallied back up today here. So keep this in mind. When you look at some simple moving averages, don't just take the first break above a moving average and take that as the direction it's heading. Yes, it can oftentimes be a tell that it's going to continue in that direction, but a lot of times it's a false positive. Until you get 2 or 3 candlesticks closing above that point, it's not legitimate. So here, in this sense, what I'm getting at is this this hasn't officially broken, right? So we want to kind of give it time to work. So for lack of better terms, right now, 40,000 could still very well be the bottom, and we just got to give it a little bit of time to figure it out. And the reason why I kind of think that is because it's pretty obvious that we've had, we're probably at a 9 or an 8 on TD sequential is my guess, based on the movement here. Yeah, we're at a 9. So here's something to recognize. When you're at a 9 on TD sequential, the likelihood of it continuing past that is lower. Right, it's not a guarantee. It can still do that. Oftentimes cryptocurrency has a tendency of just going these crazy runs. But when you see a 9 on TD sequential on more than 2 time frames, that's an indication that you might want to respect the fact that it might turn around. So this right here on the 4-hour tells us that in 4 times 7, that amount of time has effectively given us a full time frame. In other words, we got 1 day plus 8 hours. So in other words, a day and a half almost of continuation to the downside. That time frame, that amount of direction in one way has to correct itself somewhat. And by what I mean by that is we have to see one of two things. Price could come up and bounce off of 41.5 like I've mentioned, or we just see consolidation further and then a drop, or consolidate further and an increase, right? All these things are possible scenarios, but the key here is the likelihood of it is going straight down from here is very low. Even though it seems very attractive to want to take a short position because it's at the bottom point and it's probably going to lose this bottom, it may not happen right away. Again, just based on that sentiment alone. So I would just exercise caution if you're going to consider a short position just yet. I don't think it's in the cards immediately. Yes, we're close to 30 on the RSI, and traditionally speaking, it can work as a resistance once we pass that point, but it's broken right back up above. That's why we don't take the first move past a simple moving average as the actual direction it's heading. Okay, so yes, it was tempting to take a short position at 30, 39.9 or 39.3, whatever, but I think it's a little premature there. So here's some consolation, right, of course, and that's the whole turnaround aspect of things. We shouldn't be seeing much more bearish divergence here in the immediate future because it's exhausted, right? The likelihood of it coming much lower and us having that buy wall at 40,000 really tells me that we are more likely to see a turnaround here in the immediate future than we are, a reversal or a continuation of the downside. Once again, this is more so immediate future here. I'm not talking that, we won't see anything lower than 40,000, but I am saying that right now, today, perhaps, it's probably likely we won't see that happen. I think we're going to get a close at between 40 and 41.5 today. I think that's pretty likely. Again, I hope I'm wrong because, of course, a short position to the downside would just give us better dollar cost average targets and the whole 9 yards there. That's perfectly fine. But on the same accord, it doesn't feel like it's going to continue much further based on how much is done. But here's something to take away. Again, this is a lower high, right? And these are obviously lower lows. So we are in a lower high, lower low pattern ever since February 10th. Okay. So that is not ideal. And once again, this highest point here that did touch close to 46,000, 45.8 and some change somewhere there, that was technically higher than the most recent high, but just by a couple of hundred, right? It's not that much. It wasn't a significant break. So again, 45,500 is still a key level resistance, which obviously we saw right here. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at there on the 4 hour. So a 4 hour tells us we have a reversal coming to the upside, right? Potential reversal to the upside. Is it going to be super strong? That remains to be seen, but that is a good sign, right? Potential reversal on the 4 hour could imply we might see a new higher, well, I guess higher low, essentially, depending on the time frame you look at. I guess all I'm trying to get at here is the 4 hour chart is telling us that we're fairly exhausted, and we need to respect that. Let's take a look at the 1 hour and see if that exhaustion lines up. If we're at like a 6, 7, or 8, then I would say a reversal is probably going to happen in the relative near future. So let's go ahead and take a look here. All right, we're at a 6. So normally I would say there's about 3 to 4 hours worth of continuation of the downside, which is likely, right? But I think the more likelihood here is that we're going to see a sideways action based on the fact that we're at a 9 on TD sequential in the 4 hour, but also because we've hit 9 already recently and it went right past and went directly into overtime. So what I mean by that here is if you see this 9, it should have reversed here, right? That's what it should have done. Anytime you see a second 9 on TD sequential, which this is going to be at a 9 potentially soon, if we were to hit that, the likelihood of it going much further down is very, very low. And what that just implies, once again, is that you're having 18 hours of continuation straight to the downside without any breathing room. Yes, there's been some breathing room here. We got a little reset, but we had this extreme overtime here, which was almost a full 3.5%, which may not seem like a lot, but for an altcoin, that's 7.5 to 12 to 15 to 20% in some cases, right? That's how large of a correction we probably saw on some of those coins. That being said, we hit an extreme exhaustive state here, consolidated and went lower. I think it's greedy to consider the fact that the price will go any lower in the immediate future. Again, just trying to drive that home. Not saying you got to take a long position on the upside, but I'm saying it's probably more likely to relax and chill out and hang out here for the next couple of days, perhaps even the weekend, than it is to come down much further. Again, pending no crazy nonsense with the news. I have to throw that into every video I make because it's just the way that it works. But here's the funny thing. Regardless of those things that happen in the news, a lot of times Bitcoin will still come to its original fruition, so to speak. It usually does what it's supposed to do regardless of the news. Sometimes the news doesn't matter. It's just kind of a catalyst that pushes it a little faster. But what I'm getting at here is the 1 hour is telling us that we should expect a reversal soon. At best, 3 hours worth of continuation to the downside and or to this side. right? Consolidation is more likely than not. I don't think we're going to see much else. In fact, let's see, there's been a lot of volume here at this point, right? So this is a point of contention. If we can see this here, obviously we see the most amount of volume at this point. Strong amount of volume here, of course, to push the downside, but just enough as well to recover back up. So again, that's that trying to break that 200-day simple moving average on the 4-hour chart, right? It tried to break below, but there's a strong buy wall here. Not a lot of folks are wanting to let the price go lower than 40,000 for the moment, right? The bulls are ready to take control. Bears are getting exhausted. So that's kind of one of those exhaustive things we got to recognize. That's why TD sequential is helpful to identify a turnaround. And also, if you look at the volume, you can see that increase here as well. There's a lot more buying pressure. I think the likelihood of the price coming down lower is, again, very low, right? At least in the immediate future. And I mean, next few couple of trading days, this weekend might be a pretty dead weekend. We might see a lot of consolidation at 40/41,000. So that being said, looking one last thing here, of course, Ichimoku Cloud, we are coming closer to a potential close of a short position, right? And this does align with TD Sequential telling us that we've only got about 3 hours left of continuation to the downside. If we don't get much continuation to the downside with this increased volume, which is unlikely, then we should expect a reversal. And once again, this reversal may not be very strong, but it could be likely a test of 41.5 or 43,000. Those are probably the two most immediate targets I would consider at this time. So to me, the odds are in our favor that we're going taking a long position from here is much more favorable than a short position, at least in the relative, again, near future, next couple of trading days, perhaps throughout the weekend. So it wouldn't be terrible to consider adding to your position right now and or taking a short-term position, in other words, a position you're going to hold for a short amount of time, to the upside, a long position essentially, that is going to be held with a tight stop loss to the upside. I think that's more likely than not the situation here based on what I see. Again, we're overexhausted. Ichimoku Cloud is telling us we are getting close to a potential close of our position. So if we can get 3 to 4 more hours of sideways action, we should be just fine to experience some type of I would say, I hate to say reversal because it's not going to just reverse and ramp back up. But once again, it could very well come up to test 41.5, possibly even 43,000 in the early to middle of next week. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at. Those are essentially my thoughts. I hope that you perhaps learned something here today. It's been maybe more enlightening than the other way around. And if you're not currently a community member, please consider joining. Link in the description below. CryptoCache.tech is the site. And of course, I look forward to getting to know you better and working with you because it's a really good experience. Thank you again so much to my current community members, and I look forward to our roundtable discussions we have every week. You have yourself a great rest of your day. We'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks again for your time. We'll see ya.